my acne, and I had pretty bad acne and almost like rosacea looking stuff on my skin. That all cleared up. That actually took a longer time to clear up than I wanted to, but I stuck with it, and with time, it all cleared up. I just noticed my skin getting better and better. I posted some pictures of this on my Instagram so people could see some before and afters on there. But my skin is so clear. I used to have chronic dry skin. It's no longer dry. It's very clear, no rosacea, no acne. My thyroid is much better. It's completely stable. My thyroid numbers come back more stable. And I get the nodules ultrasound every year, and that they've been stable. My gut health is the best it's ever been. I cannot believe that there's a world that exists without bloat and gas, because that just was never. I was always chronically bloated and chronically gassy, and it's gas pain. So that is like, there is zero. I can't even believe that exists, that you can have zero bloating and zero gas. I had developed scalp psoriasis, and that completely cleared up. My dry scalp is cleared up. My periods are regular and they are no longer painful. It's incredible to not have to take ibuprofen or be woken up in the middle of the night like I'm having labor pains. My kidneys, the whatever kidney stones I had left, because I don't know if I'd mentioned earlier, I developed them. I did pass them when I'd passed some back when I was in my late 20s. And I mean, I'm telling you, I'd rather have another C-section than pass a kidney stone again, because that's how painful they were. And the remaining kidney stones that I guess stayed are that I've had no kidney pain at all. My immune system, which was in the gutter when I first got my blood labs from, this is something I forgot to mention as well. When I first got my blood labs with my MS specialist, the panel that shows your immune system, like the monocytes, lymphocytes, all those things, it was completely in the gutter. I sent it to a friend of mine who's good at reading blood work, and he's like, Colleen, you have the immune system of like a 87-year-old. Like my mother has like a better immune system than you. And I was like, how's that possible? Because I've been juicing every day. I remember feeling so much anger about that because I had been juicing. One of my goals was to improve my immune health because I always got sick so easily, and it would take me forever to recover. So my immune numbers went up in my blood work. I'm no longer nutrient deficient with, low B12 and vitamin D without even supplementing. Those are normal. I'm able to recover. I still catch things here and there as I'm a teacher, and I have a little guy at home, so he brings stuff home. So this winter I caught a few things, but my recovery is night and day. I used to have to be in bed for at least like 2 weeks. I was down and out for weeks, and now I recover so much more quickly. My dental health is so much better. I used to have to get cavity filled every year. Since going carnivore, it's almost 2 years, not a single trace of a cavity. And I had receding gum lines and borderline gum disease, which is crazy because I thought I was eating so healthy. And my gums were always bleeding and very sensitive. My gum health is so much better and no more cavities. I sleep more soundly. My electrical shock that I would get in my arm that traveled feels like I'm getting electrocuted from my shoulder down to my hand. It happens less frequently. Still happens here and there, but not as severe and a lot less frequently. And I used to get random body pains, especially like leg pains, and that has all stopped. I went surfing for the first time this summer with my son. And I had been told, like, just forget that. You're not going to surf anymore. I always loved longboarding. And a couple of years ago, I was told, like, you're just not going to be able to do things like that anymore. And I went out and I surfed this summer with my son. And that was like I could cry over that. It was the best feeling in the world.
Hi there, and welcome to another interview. Today I got the fabulous Colleen with me, and I'm going to ask her the same question I ask absolutely everybody. Hey, Colleen, why did you become carnivore?
That's a great question. It's a little bit loaded and it's a little bit long, but I'll start by taking you back a little bit. I grew up a 90s kid. So the standard American colorful dumpster fire of a diet. And, no shade to my parents. They did not know. They were not educated on this. And so just like all my friends, like we all had all the colorful stuff. And I can recognize autoimmune issues even as far back as being a kid. And I would have allergies that I no longer have. I would easily got sick. I had a very low immune system always. I always had a lot of stomach issues as a kid. Um, Fast forward to my teenage years, I ended up with mono, which subsequently led to Epstein-Barr, and that kicked off a whole uh, host of fatigue and exhaustion and issues that I would battle with that for years to come, and was always trying to look for remedies to feel better from that. Again, a lot of gut issues. I would have a lot of like stomach pains. I do believe I had all the symptoms of leaky gut. I developed chronic, sorry if this is TMI, but I developed chronic constipation in my teenage years. And so I was always seeking, and the reason why I give this background is because those issues led me to always be seeking some like the healthiest things I could do to remedy those things. So fast forward around the age of 25, I watched a vegan documentary, and I know this is the classic story. Most people, you hear this a lot, I'm sure. And there I went down the rabbit hole with that. And so I didn't become 100% vegan at that point, but watching that documentary, they're very compelling. They're very good at what they do, and it's very compelling. And I was very moved by it, and it inspired me to go very heavily plant-based. And so I started making these giant green smoothies, and those did help my chronic constipation because I had been dealing with this. I'm 25 now. I've been dealing with this from the age of about 16. And anything that made that issue better without having to take laxatives, without having to finally go get colonics and things like that. The fact that those green smoothies made that issue better was like, oh, like this is what I got to go with, so kind of fueled my fire for being more plant-based. Within 2 to 3 years, roughly, if I'm estimating here, of going very heavily plant-based and oxalate bombing myself and green smoothies, and I developed kidney stones and I developed thyroid nodules. And at one point, my blood work for my thyroid came back like really messed up. I don't know exactly what the numbers were, but I remember getting the phone call and they scared the life out of me because they're like, "Oh my God, Colleen, your thyroid is really out of whack. Your blood work's out of whack. You probably have nodules. We're going to send you for a ultrasound for that, but you need to get on Synthroid." And I was like, Synthroid? Doesn't that kind of like, I didn't know enough about it. So I was too afraid to do that. And I said, well, let me try, cleaning up my diet a little, see if that helps things. I probably at that point brought back in eggs and stuff like that. And I don't somehow, by the grace of God, I was able to level out the thyroid numbers to avoid going on thyroid medication. But, and I want to point out at one point during those same years, I was hospitalized once for bacteria from greens. It was from a bad batch of greens from one of my green smoothies that I thought were like, my lifesaver, my saving grace. And that was pretty rough. I was in the hospital for like at least 2 days, just completely out of it. My body was ravaged from whatever this bacteria was. So continuing on, my gut health's still terrible. My immune system is still terrible, and I can't understand why, because I'm thinking like I'm pretty healthy aside from like having little cheat meals here and there. I have these big green smoothies every day, and I eat so vegetable heavy, and I eat all these salads and things that I thought were healthy. And my gut health continued to be pretty poor. And then I started developing really bad acne and bad skin. This is in my like real later 20s. And I remember feverishly researching, like, because forget it, now that my skin is looking bad, I'm a female, I like to, we care about our skin, we care about our appearance. And now this is really getting to me. And I'm researching, and I come across the vegan influencers and the vegan YouTubes and the vegan world. And I come across a girl that promotes this diet of like heavy in fruits. And it's like, the diet is you eat raw vegan all day, and then you can have a cooked meal for a vegan cooked meal. So I was like, well, let me try this, because everybody was in the comment section saying that helped their skin. So I was looking to clear up my skin now. So I was desperate to do whatever it took. I went full vegan, and this was about when I was like, I want to say it was late 20s, so maybe like 28, 29. And so I would raw fruit, raw food all day. And I would start off the day with a ton of fruit, because that was like what was recommended. And like these giant banana smoothies, and just didn't realize I was sugar bombing myself. And that was rough. I can't even believe I lasted like a month on it, let alone, I didn't last a year, but I lasted about 7 months. I didn't even make it a year. It was such excruciating bloating and gas pain. It was borderline traumatizing, because I'd be at work. I am a teacher, and I would go behind the partition. There was a table in one of the rooms that I teach in. There was a partition. So like if you were to look in, you can't see behind that partition. And there was a table, and literally I would have to like shut my lights off, and on my prep or on my lunch, I would have to lay on that table, because the gas pain was so excruciating and the bloating was so heavy. I looked almost like I was pregnant. I would like wear loose fitting tops. And I stuck with this, because they tell you like, oh, that's normal in the beginning, that goes away. And then about after like 7 months, I was like, I can't take this anymore. It's so, this is so pain. This is a painful existence to have these symptoms every day. And I finally realized this is not working for me. So I kind of went back down, I went back to like my old plant-based model. But I think I would have like oatmeal almost every morning. And I think I started including back eggs a little bit, because I felt like my body needed the protein, and I just felt a little better with eggs, but I was still heavily plant-based. And skin is still acting up. And embarrassingly enough, I would treat meat, because I was so brainwashed from watching and going down that road where they teach you all these things. I really did. I was one of the many people who believed that red meat was unhealthy for you, and it's the cause of this and it's the cause of that. And I really should never eat it, but I love it so much. I naturally love red meat. It was my favorite thing growing up. If my mom was making steak or meatloaf, I was like I was like, yay, those are my favorite dinners. And I used to want to like lick the grease on the pan. Like that's my nature, but I was suppressing that, because I really had it in my head that this has to be bad for you. This is what is being taught to me. And so I embarrassingly treated meat and steak as a cheat food. That was my cheat food back then. So I continued to struggle with energy, hormones. I always had painful periods and irregular periods. So, and they were so painful. And also, I guess because my hormones may have been out of whack, I would have extreme fatigue during the time of my cycle. And so fatigue and very painful periods, I would have to wake up in the middle of the night, and it would wake me up like labor pain, and I wouldn't be able to fall back asleep until I took a bunch of ibuprofen, and then that kicked in. So, and that is now far better when we'll get to that. So fast forward to the summer of 2017, and this is where there's a little curveball of my story, but I have to include it because I feel like it is, I believe it's a large part of my MS journey, and what kicked off the worst symptoms for me. I had, and what makes this part of the story ironic is I was working for a plant-based MLM company, one of those, and it was plant-based. So it makes it a little funny now that I'm carnivore. And due to working for that company, I accompanied my mother to one of her chiropractic appointments, and because she had told me they're so into all that natural plant-based stuff, so maybe come with me in my appointment and see if they'll be interested in the company. So I was basically kind of there for a sales pitch. And as I'm there, I was convinced to, why not get an adjustment? I had never gotten one prior. I never had felt the need for it, but I always heard, almost everybody and their mother that I know goes to chiropractors, and my own mother had been going to this one for a while. So I just trusted, and I didn't know anything about the chiropractic world. I just knew people get them and they're fine. And, the doctor explained to me while I was there with him that, these are the health benefits in them, and I'm into anything that can improve your health. So I was like, sure, I'll get one. As he went to go crack my neck, I actually had like this gut reaction, and I'll never forget feeling this. It's like, and this is a good example of why you should listen and trust your gut, because I had this gut feeling of, this doesn't feel right. Like, I don't want him to crack my neck. It doesn't feel right. But I pushed that aside, and I'm like, shut up, you're being ridiculous. And just went with it. And I walked out of the office fine. But the next day, I could not get out of bed. It was like I had been in a car accident, just without like the body aches. And but in terms of how like my brain felt like it had been battered or drugged or something, and I was in such a confused state, almost like a borderline demented state, where I just was so confused. So my eyes couldn't wake up. Like, I just couldn't wake up. I felt like I was drugged. And I remember having to go to the bathroom, and I had to like scale the wall to like get to the bathroom and then go right back to bed, because I just couldn't function to do anything else. And I stayed in that state for days. And because I was so confused and malfunctioning, I wasn't even able to connect it to, if it was to that. And at first I would not have connected it, because I just was so ignorant. I didn't know anything. I even questioned myself if I was like, did I sleepwalk and wake up and take something? Did I drug myself with something? Like, I had to question every possible, because I couldn't believe that the day before I was like up and pretty okay. And now I'm having these extreme symptoms that are debilitating. And so days continue to pass, and I just slowly start to regain a little bit more functioning, a little bit better. And then it got brought to my attention that maybe it was from that, because my husband had heard of sometimes with necks and crack, like he's friends with a chiropractor, and he's like, I know, like, he doesn't like to touch people's necks. So did he touch your neck? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, like that could very much have to do with it. And when I backtracked, I'm like, yeah, I woke up the next day like this. So I did call that doctor and tell him about this. And he said it's unusual that if people are going to have that reaction, it's usually right away and not a delay, like where it's like the next day. So of course I'm an unusual case. I this was the summer. So this was probably around July. The symptoms got a little bit better where I can get up and do things finally, but I stayed in like a disoriented, dizzy state. And then people were pointing me because I was telling people around me about it, and they're like, it sounds like you might have vertigo. And I was like, oh, okay, hopefully I just have vertigo. And that's my answer. So I went to PT for it. They tried doing the thing with the ears. And then I ended up at an ENT being told that it was probably vertigo. The ENT, upon hearing that that this started right after neck adjustment, he was actually alarmed because he does not believe in those. And so he's like, ugh, people have had strokes from neck adjustment, which blew me away. And I was like, oh my God, you're telling me I could have had a stroke. And he said, so I want an MRI on your brain right away to make sure that, there's no signs of a stroke. And so we did that plus all his other audiologist testing, and everything came back fine. My brain MRI came back, no signs of a stroke. But it did say slight white matter changes. But he didn't even bring that up to me. So he just was not alarmed about my MRI at that time. So this was probably like a month after the adjustment. So no MS lesions though. So he's not concerned that I have that. Like nothing mentioned about MS. And he set off. I went on my merry way. I still had no answers. I go back to work. Work is very hard for me to function with this symptom I'm still experiencing in my brain, and my vision felt off. Kind of hard to articulate the symptoms because it just felt like, the best way I can say it is I felt like I had like brain damage to a certain degree. I had to go on an amphetamine in order to keep my job because I just was in like such a fog, and my brain felt like it was in such a suppressed state all the time. And so it took Adderall in order to get me out of bed and functioning every day. And it didn't help that I had all this extra inflammation from my diet, not knowing that all the grains, all the oxalates, all the oatmeal is not helping my case. I had a lot of grains too. I was pretty grain heavy because it was told to us like, yo, yeah, you could have healthy grains. And that was increasing my inflammation. So then fast forward a few months later, and I get pregnant and with my son. So, the excitement of the pregnancy kind of takes over. And for people who don't know, a lot of people with MS, pregnancy you tend to feel a little better during pregnancy and breastfeeding. And that was not known to me. Oh, also, before I forget, something else that I remembered in the wake of that adjustment, not only feeling those very intense brain symptoms, I also developed a heat intolerance. So the very first bath or shower that I took following that incident, I felt faint-like, and I had no clue what that was. I was so confused by that because I had no education about what MS wasn't even in the picture for me. And come to find out that one of the signature symptoms of MS is a heat intolerance, where you get very easily fatigued from heat and you just cannot tolerate heat well, and you start to feel almost faint-like. And so the very first shower and hot bath I took, I had to like hold on to I thought I was going to faint. So that was a horrible symptom that also got developed. But again, so fast forward, now it's in the late fall of 2017. I discover I'm pregnant, and just the happiness of that just took over, and I was so excited. I unfortunately did have to remain on a very low dose of amphetamine in order to again function and keep my job. My doctor told me, like, as long as the benefit outweighs the risk. So that's something that I was very resentful of, because it was like a catch-22. I couldn't lose my job, but I had to remain on a low dose of an amphetamine in order to maintain brain function. It was like the only way I could maintain brain function. And so anyway, I came to a point where I felt like I just have to accept that this is my new normal. I always feel a little wonky and dizzy and off. And, as long as my brain's clear, I just got to move on with my life. The baby came, I breastfed. I was pretty okay during that period. And when I stopped breastfeeding, it's like all the happy baby hormones left, and in came flooding in just the worst symptoms. Like all the inflammation came back with a vengeance. All the symptoms came back with a vengeance. I felt like I was literally dying. I remember just getting out of bed and then taking care of what I had to take care of with the baby, and then like going back down, laying down and just laying there. And I told my husband one day, I'm like, I literally feel like I'm dying. Like I feel like I'm being poisoned to death. Oh, and to backtrack really quick to the pregnancy, and this is just something I like to highlight because I think it's a little funny, is during my pregnancy, I still had my green smoothies all the time, but I threw most of the caution to the wind, and I just was so fed up with feeling terrible all the time. And I just allowed myself to eat whatever I wanted. And a lot of my cravings were sweet cravings. So I will admit that I was not the best eater during pregnancy, and I regret it. And I got diagnosed with gestational diabetes. And why I bring this up is because I think people will find humor or sadness in the fact that my doctor at the time told me it had nothing to do with my diet. He said it had absolutely nothing to do with the diet, because I said, oh my gosh, I have been eating a lot of like sweet cereals and like cakes and sweets. Like I went on a sweet binge, and I said, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have done that. And he said, no, eat whatever you want. This has nothing to do with diet. And I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't know better, so I believed him. And I kept doing what I'm doing. I had to check my blood sugars every day. I had to go on a medication for it because it just, no matter what I did, my blood sugars were so high. And looking back on my life now, I do think I was pre-diabetic for a long time, because I would always have these horrible crashes. And I look back now and I think that my insulin was messed up. I think my blood sugars I think I was always on a blood sugar roller coaster. But nobody ever caught it. And so anyway, yeah, he told me that the gestational diabetes has nothing to do with my diet. And I highly disagree. But again, fast forward, when I stopped breastfeeding and the explosion of symptoms came back, it was around this time, someone had brought it to my attention about breast implant illness. And I did have breast implants at the time. And so many of my symptoms matched up to breast implant illness. So it was in my head, oh my gosh, it's a foreign object. It's probably causing problems. So I did go ahead and get my breast implants removed. And I felt better for like a week. And I don't know if it was just because of the coincidence or because just the immediate removal of a foreign object, it probably was adding some inflammation, but then the symptoms came flooding back. And so here I go back down the spiral of research, desperately trying to find what could make me feel better, because I would be at work and I seriously would have moments where, after even drinking all these smoothies, a million supplements, I was always on a million supplements. I was always vitamin deficient. And so I was researching what else can there has to be something else I can do. And I came across a juicing documentary and I came across the medical medium and all the celery juice stuff and the cleansing and detoxes. So I went down that path of, okay, I got to juice because maybe it's the most bioavailable way to get nutrients in my system, because I always feel nutrient deficient and I always feel like I'm dying and miserable, and brain fog was debilitating. And I started juicing a ton, and it looked like a factory in my kitchen of like a juicing factory every day. Like my whole entire center island would be the whole entire rainbow of produce. It was exhausting. And I actually had a really bad reaction to celery juice, where my skin just all over was like breaking out. It was like rashes, I don't know, acne, even like on my shoulders and in my back. And in that community just kept saying, it's detox, it's detox, it's detox, it'll go away. And I'm just listening to this. So I'm like, okay, I got to plow through. I plugged through as good as I could, over a year doing this with the celery juice and all the other juices. And I'm telling you, like, gallons of plant juice I drank, which is like, now that I know what I know, I just cringe. And my skin became very photosensitive too. I noticed while I was doing this, like I would step in the sun and get like rashes. So my skin became very photosensitive in the sun from doing all of this. My skin is still terrible, and I'm doing all this juicing. And then fast forward, my symptoms just got so bad, so debilitating, that I had to go get more MRIs. So once they redid the MRIs, now it's a few years later, now all the lesions show up. So now they're telling me, the radiology report is reading, these are all indicative of MS. And then the doctors are telling me, we really believe you have MS, but, you need a spinal tap to confirm it. And such a mixture of emotions. For shock, I thought it was a death sentence. I thought my life was over. But at the same time, I thought, no, that can't be me. I've been such an athlete my whole life. I've done all these things to improve my health. This just can't be me. And I even switched doctors because I just could not accept that answer. And I was hoping a new doctor would provide, with a new set of eyes, would give me the answer I was looking for, which is, no, it's not that. So off I went to a new doctor, hoping that I would get a new answer. And I did not get a new answer. He was like, you have MS. This is classic MS. And I'm going to send you for a spinal tap to confirm it. The spinal tap did confirm it. And I remember one of the first times in his office, this was my second neurologist, and I brought up the idea of diet because there was months between the first doctor telling me I had MS and then this new doctor, because I had switched. So I had to wait a few months to get in there. And in those few months, I did a lot of research for MS, and I came across Dr. Terry Walls, who is amazing. And she completely reversed her MS through diet. And she was one of my biggest inspirations, because she was my first glimpse of hope that something something dietary wise can help this. So she was like my first glimpse of hope. Um, and so I leaned into that protocol for a while, which was pretty good. I mean, still vegetable heavy, but she introduced me to organs and certain types of like mushrooms that have medicinal value, like lion's mane and things like that. And so I started getting into that a little bit and she was big on dropping gluten and pasteurized dairy. And so I got rid of gluten. I felt a slight decrease of inflammation just from dropping gluten and dropping most processed food. But the problem is with this is my interpretation of going gluten-free was, oh, as long as it's labeled gluten-free, I could go down the gluten-free aisle and pick out, all these gluten-free treats, not knowing about seed oils, not knowing about all the other chemicals and toxic starches that are still in those packaged gluten-free foods. So I was doing things wrong there. And I had brought up to this second neurologist, what are your thoughts on, Dr. Terry Wahls? And he's like, who? And I said, Dr. Terry Wahls, she does this, the Wahls protocol. She has this protocol with diet that she reversed her MS. She got out of a wheelchair and, she's doing amazing. And he's like, oh, no, don't even think about doing that. He's like, don't, people that try to do this through diet, they don't last. That doesn't work. You need medication, don't even do it. Like diet has no role basically. And I was like, oh my gosh. So from there, I still held off on meds at that point. He wanted me on right away, but I wanted to see a specialist. So I switched to an MS specialist. And it took me about 5-6 months to get into him. By the time I did get to him, it was like 6 months later. So he wanted a whole repeat of all the MRIs to see if anything, to see what my status is now. The new MRIs showed even more lesion progression. And that scared me to death. And so he really he's like, listen, and I really want to say, I do love my specialist. That I still see him. I love the office. I love the nurses. They're nothing but wonderful people. So I want to preface by that. I'm not bashing them at all. But he convinced me to go on meds, and I understand why. I was showing lesion progression. So at this point I agreed, and I was set to start an infusion called Thai Sabri every month. And I started that in the early fall of 22, I believe. And so this was around October. Coincidentally, around the same time is when I discovered the carnivore diet. And to make a long story short for that, someone responded to a comment in a Facebook group. And it just shows you how the universe works, because I had previously been like in these bouts of horrible depression where I would just like lock myself in a room in my house and just lay on the bed and just cry. And, and I believe in a higher power. So I would just cry out to God and say, like, please, please show me show me what I need to do, because I felt like a prisoner in my body. It wasn't every day, but most days it was horrible. I just felt like my brain was powering down. I felt like my cognition, I noticed my cognitive abilities tanking, my ability to think. Like I'd be at work, I couldn't think straight. It would affected my vision. I would have a hard time reading emails. I was failing at work so bad. At one point, I even got brought into HR because it was just so noticeable that, and it's weird because I was very embarrassed to show anybody that I was failing so bad. There was like an embarrassment there. And that's why it's like, you really never know what someone's going through, because I still would get myself together for work because I said I need to at least appear like I'm okay. And I don't want to bring attention to me. I don't want to look like I'm failing as bad as I am, because I don't want to have to talk about it to people. It's embarrassing. I don't want negative attention. So I would go into the bathroom at work. I would let out a good cry because I'd break down from the fact of like being there and feeling so different from everybody else and like so malfunctioning, and look around and realize everybody else is functioning normal. And I feel like I am going into a state of dementia and my brain just feels like it's failing. I had an electrical shock that would go down my arm and it would feel like I was getting electrocuted. And this would all happen at work, and I would have these crashes where I felt like I'm like gonna black out and die. And so I really was like, there was times I was hardly answering emails because I just couldn't. It was hard to even see straight, and so it became noticeable to my superiors. And so I got called into HR at one point. I mean, they laid out for me like my my options, if you will, like this is what you could do. Like basically I could go on disability. And I was, at this point, I was just such a depressed mess. And the depression, I never understood depression until this, because I was always just a happy person. And feeling, being aware enough to watch myself deteriorate was just so depressing. And I felt like a terrible wife and a terrible mother. And I've spent so many weekends bedridden, and my husband had to pick up all my slack. And, my son had to see me like that. And it was just horrible. It was like my nightmare. And I'm a very athletic person by nature. So it just was like, at one point I couldn't even be upright without feeling faint, like almost faint, like things were going black. And by the grace of God, one day after crying out for help, a notification went off. Somebody answered one of my questions in one of these Facebook groups where I asked something about if there's an anti-inflammatory that people go on for MS, if it helps. I was desperate. And someone months later, this is how the universe works, because I hadn't even asked that question recently. I had asked this months later, and I got a notification that somebody answered it, and they answered it with, you need to check out the carnivore diet. And it has tremendous success with people with MS, and you need to look up Emily Penton. And so she brought me to her page, and she has an incredible story herself. And it was like a light bulb went off, and I can't explain it, but I had felt like this gut feeling like this is God answering me, because I had been asking to please show me something, because I had really dark thoughts. And I'm embarrassed to even say that, because I know, my parents will probably see this. But I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to this. So it's important for me to state that I really did have a lot of dark thoughts, because I just thought that I was going to deteriorate to nothing. And when this person said this to me, I was like, oh my God, I think I've been doing it all wrong. And I immediately launched into the research for carnivore. I found all the amazing, inspiring carnivore doctors and carnivore accounts and all these amazing success stories. That very next day, I went carnivore, and I had like bacon and eggs for breakfast, ground beef and eggs for lunch. So I just launched into it. And within days of going carnivore, I noticed just a shift in my mood, like an uplift in my mood, and a lift from some of the debilitating brain fog. And that alone was enough to really fuel my fire and see a light in the tunnel. And once I saw a little bit of light in that tunnel and started seeing a lift in those things, which had been so bad for so long, I was like, this is my avenue. Like, this is what and it just feels so right. And the more I went into it, the more sense things made. It's like everything that I thought I knew, I was reprogramming myself day in and day out. And sorry, I think a call is coming through. Just going to send that to voicemail. Are you still there? Sorry, somebody was calling through. Um, I'm not going to say that I didn't hit hurdles in the beginning because it's a super drastic diet change. I had been doing a little bit of the Wahl's protocol. Like I said, no shade to her. She's wonderful and amazing, and I'm so thankful for her to inspire me. But I felt like it was a little too vegetable heavy for me. Vegetables were still not my friend. They were still causing me gas and bloat. And it was a little more involved. And when I found carnivore, it just made sense. It was the simplicity of it was like, wow, this is so much easier than what I've been doing. What I've been doing is so much work, slaving over a juicer, slaving over the NutriBullet and relying so much on drinking every meal and just doing things wrong. And I just feel like my life became easier. Just the meal prep was easier. And about after 8 months of doing this, and I'm slowly seeing more and more positives, I decided to try my luck around May or June of 23. And to my doctor's dislike, I tried my luck off of meds. And I just felt confident enough to try it. And like I said, I don't, I'm not like super anti-med. The MS meds have come a long way. So I'm not trying to tell anybody else out there go off meds. I did it at my own risk. But I just felt like I needed to do this to try it out. And it was a risk. But thank God it's been going well. And around the same time that I chose to go off of meds, circling back to the neck thing, I had discovered that, and some people don't believe this, and that's fine, but I have discovered that there is a big correlation with neck injury and MS. And I would have never thought that. But apparently there is a correlation. And I had found a doctor in New York that does upper cervical treatment, and it's non-cracking. And he has a tremendous amount of success with people with neck injuries and also people with MS, because sometimes there's something going wrong in the neck. And he did this extensive imaging, and he did find compression on my jugular. And he also found that my atlas bone was out of whack, and there was like restriction of CFS fluids, cerebral spinal fluid. And that's what his imaging found, and that it was like backing up in my brain. And then my dietary choices on top of it were just creating this explosion of inflammation where it was unbearable. So I did go off of meds first, and then I got his adjustment, which stirred up symptoms for a little while. But then they come back down, and I just stuck the course with carnivore, and things just, from day one of going carnivore, things just got better and better, again, with some hurdles. I did go through an oxalate dump. That was very real and very uncomfortable. But I stuck the course.
Your sound's gone. Your sound has gone. I don't know what's happened there.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You went through you went through an oxalate dump was where you were up to.
Yes, yes, yes. So I went through a pretty brutal oxalate dump. Like kidneys and my knees were killing me. But that I got through that. I powered through. But there were some other little hurt, that I've had, I wouldn't say it was 100% smooth sailing in the beginning, but I just knew, especially with the mood lifting and the brain fog lifting, that I was on the right path. And I feel like the further I went, the more things like flooded into my mind of like how evolutionarily and just biologically this makes so much sense. And I can't believe I ever was fooled into thinking like, just surviving on plants could have been how we've evolved all these years and how that could be sustainable. And this was so much more sustainable and it's so much easier. And I'm finally not hungry all the time. And I'm finally not on the blood sugar roller coaster all the time. And I just, fast forward to this summer and I just feel like I completely got my life back. It's incredible. So I'm officially over a year off of meds. I went off of meds. So it would be this May or June, depending on how you look at it. My very last Tysabri infusion was May of 23. And so now we're in August of 24 and I haven't been on meds since. And I just had an MRI that shows no new lesions. So it is pretty much in remission right now. I mean, I'm still, obviously the diagnosis is still there, but I'm working on getting those lesions reduced, and by the grace of God, they will.
Wow, what a story. That was amazing. And just for those people that can't believe this woman, if you're listening on the audio podcast, you need to actually watch the video as well, because that story is incredible. And how you look doesn't reflect that terrible history. You look absolutely glowing and full of health and very positive. Yeah, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Emily Penton, by the way, who you mentioned on Facebook, she's actually been on this channel twice to talk about her MS journey. So small coincidence there. So,
she's incredible. She's, I've tagged her in a couple of things too, thanking her. Like, I can't thank you enough, Emily. She was such a huge turning point for me, because it was her that was pointed out to me to go look at her. And once I found her, I mean, I'd already found hope through Dr. Terry Wahls. And I even had met a friend that does the Wahls protocol that had tremendous success reversing their MS. So her protocol is great. It does work for people. But it's just Carnivore just felt more, there was something about it that just felt like it was right for me, and so much more easier, so a lot more easy and simplistic. And Emily was like a huge turning point for me. I was like, her story with all the animal fat, and she helped get me over like the fear of animal fat, because that was still, it's like ingrained in us. And anybody who grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, everything's low fat. Everything was low fat. So she helped me get over my fat fear. And she was just such a huge source of inspiration for me. And she was the first one with an MS diagnosis that I had ever heard of that has healed with Carnivore. So huge shout out to Emily.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.